There is a narrative that young people are neither interested nor engaged in the political process. Or maybe it's the political process as we know it. Because here with me is a band of young people who are impassioned and equipped to speak to some of these issues as they agitate for God's standard of justice right here in Jamaica. Hi, my name is Alison Facey and welcome to GenFight Live. Now, GenFight is an initiative under the Love March movement, and it exists to empower Christian youth to speak boldly for godly laws, righteous leaders, and national revival through political engagement. Now, with election 2020 just a few days away, it's a good time for us to discuss these topics, not just because of the election, because the truth is, these topics will always be relevant. But why not have a conversation now to equip our young people how to agitate for these things through conversations with their MPs, through social media, or whatever other engagement youth creativity can conjure. Let's begin by educating on what these issues are. And so let's jump right into it, because my first guest is none other than Miss Philippa Davies, founder of #MarriageMattersJA. Now I want you to catch this catch line. Listen to this. Why and how Jamaica's oldest institution is Jamaica's best hope to prevent violent crimes, boost GDP, and improve public health. Philippa, thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you so much.
Now, that's a very bold claim by MarriageMattersJA.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm not making it up. There is an overwhelming amount of empirical evidence, research from all disciplines, whether it's history, economics, anthropology, neuroscience, and many more, to support that claim that humanity's oldest institution is Jamaica's best hope to deal with some of these big ticket issues like crime and GDP, the economy, and public health. So why are we saying that marriage, which is really at the core of family, is our best hope? Well, I've heard people say that Jamaicans are not into marriage. Well, I don't think so. If the wedding planning industry is anything to go by, they're pretty busy.
Absolutely.
But beyond the thrills and the excitement of that day, there is the institution and the relationship itself. And the fact is that we Jamaicans are into marriage because we're human. And so we're made to long for that long-term connection and acceptance and intimacy and wanting to belong. And then there is children. Right. Raising of children. How do we raise children to become productive, lawful members of society? And quite frankly, the only place where you can satisfy that individual need and societal expectation, efficiently address it, is within the family, and not just any domestic arrangement. It is a natural family, meaning a male father and a female mother joined together in that committed, nurturing union and caring for the children of their union. And that's why the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1949 says very clearly that the family is a natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled to protection by the state and society. So the family is actually a socio-economic unit, and it needs to be preserved and recognized and protected by society and the state. Why? Because that relationship of family with marriage at the core is actually the template for all human relationships in society. So every other institution, whether it is government, whether it's school, whether it's a marketplace, whether it's your social interest group, your sports, they all depend on humans relating to each other. And where do we learn how to relate to each other? That template is found in marriage, which is at the core of the family. So what's in it for society? Yes. And for young people to understand. I'm going to give you a very pithy statement by Maggie Gallagher. She says that sex makes babies. Society needs babies for continuity. Yeah. Babies need mothers and fathers. And what brings all those together? Sex, babies, mothers and fathers in society, it's marriage. That will hold men and women accountable to each other, responsibly to each other, caring for that child till they successfully and safely reach adulthood, so that they can then become productive, contributing members of society. It will cost our society, and it is costing Jamaica a whole lot to try and replicate the married family. But there's no other institution that can do it. It really is marriage at the core of family.
Wow. Boy, Philippa, I mean, if the answer is really marriage, why is there such a low precedence put on marriage in our society, in our government, and why is it that there is what seems to be a low advocacy for marriage?
Well, various reasons. There is certainly our history, our social history, because of slavery, where plantation slavery actively worked against keeping the family together because it was easier for planters to take advantage of women and men by detaching them from this core connective unit. But we found that even our former plantation owner, the UK, they have now realized that their society is falling apart for not recognizing and encouraging marriage and family. And now their government is actively trying to encourage stable married family. Well, what about us? We are suffering from that heritage. Why aren't we advocating for a stable married family? I think as believers, we need to understand that there is an ideology that does not want God's design to become the foundation of society. And so there is a real responsibility on Christian and Christian church and Christian young people to understand that God's design is the best for society, whether they're Christian or not, because we're human and we're made for this connectedness.
Absolutely.
And then to reverse the effect of history. And to understand this is social, this is economic, this is political. We're dealing about governance, and good governance begins with you and I exercising self-control over our urges and being mindful of our behaviors, because it impacts just not only me but also my neighbor.
Absolutely.
And then governance at the national level as well. So the family is your best effort to deal with all these social, economic, and political issues.
Absolutely. So you're saying young people should want to get married and should advocate for marriage.
Get married, stay married, encourage marriage, and respect marriage.
Excellent, excellent. Well, there you have it, young people, that there is significant and there exists significant benefits to marriage, to advocating for marriage if we're looking for a stable society, if we're looking for a stable Jamaica. And consider this as you form your own questions in your mind, but also questions for your MPs as they seek to form our next government. Welcome back to GenFight Live, empowering youth to vote colorblind, not along party lines, but rather on issues. And the issue we're looking at now is abortion. And with me is attorney at law and one of the vice presidents of the Love March movement, Francesca Tavares. Thank you so much for being here, Francesca.
Thank you so much for having me, Allison. It's a pleasure.
All right, so let's get straight into it. It's a sprint that we're working on today. So tell me quickly, why should young people be interested in the discourse on abortion? And should they even choose a side?
Thanks for that question. You know, that's a question like asking, why should persons be interested in justice and truth? Truth is necessary to live. And there's a saying that says, evil is allowed to happen because good men do nothing. Young persons should be involved in the issues surrounding truth in their day and in the issues surrounding justice. And the issue of abortion is an issue of great injustice. So I just want to give 3 quick points to young persons who may be watching today. 1, abortion is not a reproductive right, it's a reproductive wrong. Secondly, abortion hurts youth and creates a state-enforced culture of death, a slippery slope we don't want to go on. And thirdly, a nation is only just if it protects its most vulnerable. So let's go to the first point. Abortion is not a reproductive right, it's a reproductive wrong. It not only destroys one human life for sure, sometimes it kills 2. Abortion carries risks and has lasting, devastating impacts on the mother or the would-be mother. Physical implications include accidental tearing of the uterine artery, heavy bleeding requiring blood transfusions, abdominal cramping, infections, heart attacks, tearing of the cervix, scarring of the uterine wall, increased risk of subsequent tubal pregnancies, infertility, hepatitis, blood clots, embolism, sterility, and death. There are also psychological implications: depression, suicidal thoughts, increased risk of suicide, anxiety, sexual dysfunction, sleep disorders, eating disorders, alcohol and drug abuse, memory repression. As a matter of fact, one study by David Reardon, in his essay, the essay was titled "Rape Victims Exploited by Abortionists," found that 65% of women who had done abortion procedures were experiencing PTSD symptoms, post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. 65%, that's remarkably high.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of persons don't consider not just the physical implications of abortion, but also the psychological effects. So there's no such thing really as a safe abortion. That's like saying there is safe genocide, safe mass murder, that the gas chambers used at Auschwitz were safe. There's no such thing. Abortion always kills one person, and sometimes it kills two. Also, abortion hurts youth and creates a state-enforced culture of death. So we consider countries that have gone before us, like the Netherlands, where we see a nation where persons are afraid to go to the hospital because they might not come out alive. Particularly elderly persons, they're afraid of being murdered by doctors who may consider that their life is not of sufficient quality, non-valuable, or a burden to the state, and therefore, no, we're doing you a favor, we'll just kill you. I think of a remarkably tragic case, as recent as last year, June, the case of Noah Pathoven. I want you to remember this name, Noah Pathoven. Go and Google it, Noah Pathoven. Just last year, a 17-year-old Dutch teenager, she had been sexually abused as a child. She had a history of emotional disturbance related to that trauma, and the state concluded that it had done all it could to help her, and therefore assisted her in committing suicide.
A 17-year-old?
17-year-old child. Placed her in a facility, put her in an induced coma, and allowed her to starve to death. They said that was a compassionate alternative because her life was now unbearable. She was expected to experience unendurable suffering, and her life was of such a low quality that she could no longer live. And I say that's the slippery slope that we head down when we create a state-enforced culture of death. Abortion is just the beginning. After that, there's eugenics. Rather, that's all tied in. Eugenics, euthanasia, state-assisted suicide, all sorts of complicated, evil things intended at snuffing out the next generation. And finally, a nation is only just if it protects its most vulnerable. Who is more vulnerable than a baby in its mother's womb?
Yeah.
Can we think about that? The safest place in all the earth should be in your mother's womb. So the laws surrounding abortion and life protect the conscience of our doctors, protects the conscience of our policymakers, and protects the conscience of our nation. Wow. It's important that we maintain the sanctity of life in our legislation.
Wow. Wow, thank you so much, Fran. And in a very succinct way, you've brought across the point that even the grown young person has to consider and even ask their MPs, what is the value that you place on my life? And so we're really being equipped here, young people, as to what are the conversations that now need to be started right here where you have your MPs, where you have access to our politicians as they go to form our next government. What is the value that you place on my life and on the life of the womb, the child in the womb? More on this when we return. If you just joined us, this is GenFight Live, encouraging young people to vote colorblind, not along party lines, but rather on the issues. This is the fight of your life. And the fight we're taking on right now is the LGBTQ Agenda. And with me is Brittany Clacken, and she is a member of the Love March movement and a medical doctor here to speak to us about that agenda. Brittany, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Alison.
Now, what is this LGBTQ agenda and what are the implications, if any?
I'm glad you asked that question. But before I can tackle that, we need to really unpack what we mean when we say LGBTQ+. So this abbreviated label is now a 15-letter acronym describing a collection of sexually deviant behaviors that LGBT activists would have us to normalize, embrace, and promote. So the full acronym is LGBTQTTIQQAAPP, which stands for lesbian, gay, genderqueer, bisexual, demisexual, transgender, transsexual, two-spirit, intersex, queer, questioning, asexual, ally, pansexual, and polyamorous. So let's try to wrap your mind around that, because
I don't think many persons realize just how many things are involved in this.
Right, in the plus.
Yeah.
And in particular, many persons who would consider themselves members of the LGBTQ plus community, they don't really identify with all of those letters and they don't find that it represents them. So when we say the LGBTQ plus agenda, what we're referring to is the deliberate strategy by LGBTQ plus activists to change the culture of a nation, laws, and punish dissenters. And this agenda is not just a concoction of the conservative mind. In 2018, the Jamaica Forum for Lesbians, All Sexuals, and Gays has penned their own version, and they've called it the Gay Agenda. And it speaks to transforming many of the pillars of our society: government and laws, healthcare, sports, education, culture, and so much more. The strategy that has been really effective in the West has been to desensitize the public to homosexuality, turn it into an anti-discrimination cause that persons can garner around and feel like, they're supporting a good cause, and this garners millions of US dollars. And that money is being used to bully Caribbean nations to repeal their buggery laws, usher in same-sex marriage, and then naturally the other letters of the alphabet will follow. So what are the possible implications? So as I said, the LGBTQ agenda really seeks to change laws. Some of these laws include, for example, in healthcare, they want government-funded access to hormone therapy, which is chemical sterilization, and gender-affirming surgery, which is genital mutilation. In sports, they want individuals to be able to compete according to the gender they identify as. So a biological male can compete against a biological female. Now, to put that in perspective, picture Usain Bolt, who's the top of his class as a male, running against Shelley and Fraser Price. Call that a fair race, right? And so the list goes on and on. Regarding marriage, once we set a precedent that sex doesn't matter, a man can be a woman can be a man, two men can get married, etc., then what's the reason to really stop there? People want to marry their pets. People want to marry plants and inanimate objects. And these are not things I'm making up. There are cases all over the world where people have tried to accomplish these things. And if sex doesn't matter and all you need is consent, why can't 3 or more consenting adults get married? Why can't 2 related adults get married if they're consenting? So it's not far-fetched to think that this can happen if we're not vigilant. A recent Gleaner article published just this month reported that Mr. Andrew Holness and Dr. Peter Phillips, they signed a political code of conduct on behalf of their both parties. And the Prime Minister said that hate crimes would not only include those linked to politics, but crimes that can be seen to be motivated by the characteristic of a person. Now that is frighteningly vague because he did not expound on what those characteristics can be. And hate crime laws have been traditionally used all over the world to punish people who disagree with the LGBTQ plus agenda. There have been cases in Canada where pastors have been jailed for reading sections in the Bible that says that homosexuality is a sin. There have been a slew of cases in the US where involving Christian bakers, photographers, especially persons related to the wedding industry, who refused service to a gay wedding and they were prosecuted for that, right? There's the fear of victimization in our own culture. If you support a certain side, not the LGBTQ agenda, you can also be faced with victimization right here. So what it's really about, it's not about hate for the LGBTQ community versus tolerance. You know, our name is Love March Movement for a reason. If we truly love others, we have to tell them the truth. Once we change our culture, we have to start teaching it to the next generation. And what are we really teaching them? Are we teaching them confusion that is grounded in feelings and perception? Or are we teaching them security that is grounded in scientific facts and truth? The fact is that the experiment of the LGBTQ plus agenda is still playing out all over the world. And I would implore us in Jamaica to pause before we adopt this lifestyle that could potentially have deleterious effects well into the future.
Wow. Wow. So if we're looking for a healthy society, these are the questions we need to be asking. These are the things we need to be looking into. Again, we have more to discuss. Thank you for staying with us, but we'll be back shortly.
Thanks for staying with us at GenFight Live, empowering youth to act boldly and agitate for godly laws, righteous leaders, and national revival through political engagement. And I had to repeat that because what we're going to be talking about right now is revival, and revival at the national level. And so with me is Dr. Daniel Thomas, medical doctor and president of the Love March movement. Daniel, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Alison.
Now, national revival, that's not even a term young people use. What exactly are you advocating for?
Well, revival is what we want. We want to see the mighty outpouring of the Spirit of God on a national level. How does this even fit into the discussion though, right? Well, when those that wrote our motto, anthem, and pledge formed it, they seem to have had a vision for this country. When they wrote, Eternal Father, bless our land, guard us with thy mighty hand, they thought about a particular nation. And in many ways, it seems like our leaders have been kind of dual, have been kind of walking the line this direction and then the other direction, not necessarily having a coherent vision for the nation. And we're saying that national revival should be our aim, where the presence of the Lord pours out and it influences all the different sectors of the country. Every single area, we want the Lord to just pour out His Spirit, and so we're calling on young people to stand and fight for that.
Wow, absolutely. Now, you said that there may be a vision that our leaders had down the line. How does that play through to now and to us staring down the barrel of election 2020?
It's so important that as young people that we make the decisions that we're making, not just in a vacuum, right? There's a reason why we are so pro-life. There's a reason why we are standing against the LGBT agenda and being pro-family and standing for traditional marriage, okay? The root of that tree is the desire to please the Lord and honor the Lord on a national level. And so we're encouraging all young people, especially our believers, to stand and to grab it from the root, okay? We want to be a nation that flourishes under God. That's what our anthem says, okay? We would flourish under God. And so we want to be able to grasp that and to really own it. We are a nation under God. Look, individuals have a destiny. Our nation also has a destiny. And so we want leaders that will bring us in that direction. And we want young people that will fight for it and push for it and agitate for it, saying, what's your view of the country? Where are you really taking us? Right? And so that is exactly what we're putting forward.
And I like what you said, where you mentioned that there's a desire for the fruit of God and the fruit that we aspire for without really a desiring of the root. And so what LMM and what the GenFight challenge is about and what GenFight is really aiming for is to agitate for the roots as much as we desire the fruit. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. Because when we talk about wisdom, when we talk about the nation flourishing, when we talk about marriage and being pro-life, at the end of the day, all of these things come together in the biblical worldview. And the end product of the biblical worldview, at the end of the day, is just the mighty outpouring of the Spirit of God. At the end of the day, it is being able to bring the nation to that point when it is exactly what God envisioned. And that is what revival is.
Daniel, as you mentioned revival earlier, what I really want to ask, and is it possible for you to paint a picture as to what that would look like at the leadership level?
Right. So for our leaders, we would want them to experience that revival, right? The presence of God and the desire for God. We want leaders that will pine after the things that the Lord wants for the country, and then they will be able to lead us in that direction. That looks like leaders who are accountable, leaders who have integrity, right? Who won't just pass laws and then pretend like the people don't have any sense. Right? Who would actually consult us and listen to what we're saying. And it will look like leaders who really and truly, genuinely desire what the Lord wants. And it doesn't come off as pandering. Okay? So national revival is something that we all should be aiming for, from an individual level to a national level. And we want leaders that will internalize that message as well.
Okay. So specific to our topics, because we spoke about marriage earlier, we spoke about abortion, we spoke about the LGBTQ agenda that seems to pervert what it ought to be. We're saying that if our leaders really are a part of this revival, and if they've experienced this revival, that you're pro-life because you care about life and you value life the way God values it.
Exactly. So all the different sectors now begin to fall back in line, where we start to value the family, where we start to value the child from the womb to the tomb, right? All the way through. It works out in terms of corruption as well, because we cannot tolerate that kind of thing in the context of revival, in the context of desiring exactly what the Lord wants for the nation.
Absolutely.
So it works all the way through in all the different sectors of the nation.
Wow. So godly laws, righteous leaders, national revival, pulling Jamaica into its prophetic destiny. That's what we desire. Now, I know probably you're watching and you're saying, well, how exactly do I do that? What are the things that I need to know, get myself involved in to start making a stamp in the right direction towards agitating for these things? And that's exactly what we're doing when we come right back, so stay tuned. You do not want to miss what's coming next. Welcome back to our final segment of GenFight Live, where you will hear just what to do to get involved, what part can you play, and how to go about doing that. And we're really grateful that you stayed tuned, because this effort is to encourage young people like yourself to vote colorblind, not along party lines, but rather to vote on the issues. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the fight of your life. Now, I want to start again with Philippa, because we spoke about what the issues are. We spoke about how marriage addresses some of the issues in society, but what exactly can a young person do now, and how do I go about doing that?
Oh, well, two things, Alison. One at the personal level and one at the national level. At the personal level, follow the success sequence. The success sequence is the best pathway to prosperity, to avoid poverty and to rise out of poverty. And what it is, very simple. Finish school, get a job, get married, then have sex and babies. If you mix around or change around that order, you're putting yourself at risk for some real socioeconomic challenges that you might not have wished. So finish school, get a job, get married, then have sex and have babies. You know, there is an ad on TV and radio that says, and I'm paraphrasing, use a condom for your best life yet? Well, let me just be Jamaican. I lie that, not so. Your best path to prosperity and your best path for life, best life is this: finish school, get a job, get married, then have sex and have babies. Then the second, at the national level, ask your MP, why don't I hear you talking about this real best path to life? You know, many of them are married and many of them are enjoying their marriages. And I have heard MPs from both sides say in Parliament, we need to encourage stable family life. We need to encourage men being responsible. Young men, get married and take care of your families. So if they are enjoying it themselves, if they're speaking about it themselves, then why are they silent? And very frankly, I find it hypocritical and dishonest for you to know something that's good for your constituents, and yet you withhold that information, yet you do not advocate it. You see see for yourself the consequences of boys and girls not growing up with a mom and dad at home. We have evidence from the University of West Indies, from a criminal anthropologist, that talks about the profile of the gang member. No dad, no mom, and they're looking to belong somewhere. And unfortunately, the gang becomes that replacement family. If you have that evidence, why are you not advocating it? So young persons, you apply that success sequence and you ask your MP, here is the evidence from local and international sources. Why are you silent on the matter? And it is for Jamaica's good.
Wow. Philippa, the success sequence. No, man, that's really good. I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because it really just makes so much sense. And it makes so much sense now to pose those questions to our MPs in the same way almost that you framed it. But now it has me thinking that if there's a success sequence, wouldn't it require good laws for there to be an achievement of that success? Which brings me now to my attorney at law here at the table. Francesca, how can young people agitate for laws like that, and why even should they care?
Right, so firstly, we ought to advocate for the retention of good laws. Currently, our laws in relation to abortion are good. They set up a solid foundation for a culture that preserves life, right? So what can young people do? They can educate themselves, right? For instance, there's a myth that rape is a good reason for abortion. That's a lie. Studies, science shows, factual studies show that rape is actually a contraindication. Abortion is a contraindication for rape because it re-traumatizes an already traumatized person, creating an even more difficult situation. So myth busting, educate yourself. Secondly, get involved. Get involved in movements like Marriage Matters. Get involved in Love March movement. We're currently looking for ambassadors. Get involved in movements like JAMP. That researches the trends of our politicians. So you can say, is my politician really representing me well? Why haven't they advocated on these issues, even though they mentioned this in their campaign and we spoke one away? So it's important for you as a young person to get involved. And thirdly, finally, vote. Your vote matters. If there's anyone who is sitting down right now, you have your voter's ID and you say, sure, it won't make no sense, you know. That's a lie. I asked you to rubbish that. Your vote matters. It has great impact. And even the most recent election shows that social media and the youth vote can sway the direction of an entire nation. So who's to say your vote could make the difference?
Wow, wow. Well, there you have it. There you have it. And there's still more. Because we started with Filippo looking at marriage, we spoke to Francesca looking at the laws and how to agitate for that. But how now do we tackle even an agenda that may seek to work its way into our government? And so we're going to go to Brittany, really quickly, Brittany, specific to the agenda, to tell our young people what can they do and how.
Right, so what we're saying is we need to look at the international trends. It starts with repealing buggery laws. Then there's a push for same-sex marriage. Then there's the push to decrease the legal age of consent. Then comes polyamorous, polygamous relationships, and the list goes on and on and on. We want to implore young people to be aware of the issues, follow the international trends, and follow them to completion. Ask your MPs, what is your view on this? Are you going to allow pressure from the UN and other international organizations to directly influence the laws of this nation? Jamaica is a different country with different cultures, different values, deep-seated Christian values that are the bedrock of this nation, and we should not allow foreign powers to dictate what we do. Furthermore, this experiment of adopting the LGBTQ+ agenda is still playing out all over the world. We hear scary statistics of a suicide rate as high as 40% in the transgender community, and that is not related to discrimination against them, as opposed to a suicide rate of 5% in the general population. Now, as government, as leaders, we want them to enact laws that would lead to a vibrant and healthy society, not laws that would be detrimental to the society. So pressure your MPs, join the movement, join the army, join on to groups that are advocating for righteous laws, and educate yourself about the issues, because it's not about intolerance and it's not about hate, it's about what is truth, grounded in facts. A biological man is a biological man. A biological woman is a biological woman. And in some places that is considered hate speech. So we need to watch this hate crime legislation that was mentioned recently and ask your MPs what is entailed in that hate speech legislation? What is considered a hate crime? And how will those laws be enacted? And stand up for what you believe is right. Stand up for what you know is right as a young person in this nation.
Absolutely. And based on their responses, use that to inform your vote. So it's only fitting that we go now to Daniel, who spoke about revival. And we spoke about our forefathers having a vision, it would seem, for the country. That time in our anthem by saying under God, and in our pledge by saying before God. But no, as we look to election 2020 and in our current society, how can young people agitate for that vision and agitate for revival under God, before God? No.
So definitely every young person, every believer, we need to see the link between what God wants to do in this country and every election. Okay, this is an opportunity for us to use the power that God has given us to vote, to make an impact on a national level. We're to love the Lord God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the strength of a people in a country, in the context of an election, is the vote. Right? So everything is intertwined. So we want to invite young people across this nation to stand for righteousness. Think about the different issues. Think about the abortion. Is my MP pro-life or is my MP pro-death? Is my MP going to push to allow for same-sex marriage to leak into this country? Can they be easily bought, right, in terms of corruption? What is their position on the family? Are they speaking up on the issues? All of these things are tuned to the Lord's heart.
Yeah.
And that is the background. And that is what we need to own as a people. We are a nation under God.
Yeah.
This is where we want to go. And we're not just going to be bought out. We're not just going to be tricked into going a particular direction because it sounds good or because other countries are doing it. This is who we are. We need to stand together as young people and pull this nation into its prophetic destiny. That looks like prayer, that looks like revival, but it also looks like voting. Allow the Lord to lead you as you go to that voting booth. Allow the Lord to speak into your heart and trust that He's using your vote for national transformation and for revival.
Wow, absolutely. And as we wrap up, mention was made of joining the movement and joining an army.
Right.
How exactly can young people do that?
Right, so the Love March Movement, we have our Facebook and Instagram pages as well, and we're also on Twitter. We're asking persons to just check out our content, like and share what we have. But then there's also a Google form, the GenFight Google form that you can fill out, put in the information so that we can have a bank where when we have the need for a protest, when we have the need for a petition, we can just shoot you a message to say, look, army, rise up. We need to stand for righteousness in the country right now. Follow us on our social media pages. We fast every Wednesday as well for this nation. It's the LMM Warrior Fast, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And do the GenFight Challenge. Check that out and you will see. Stand with us.
And there you have it. And let me thank my panelists again. Thank you so much for being here as we together encourage young people to vote colorblind, content over color, to vote on issues rather than along party lines. And a lot of information was shared as to what you can do to get involved right now. So please check out our social media pages, but most importantly, trust, as Daniel said, that the Lord uses your vote on election day, which is exactly where I'll see you next. This was GenFight Live, the fight of your life. Thanks for joining us.